Sarah, Abby, and Connor just joined. Have you heard from Joe lately?
I saw him on Sunday. They had that antique, whatever they call it, roadshow, the Historic Society.
Oh, right.
He was there.
I heard from him a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
I thought he
I
was
think
coming.
he's probably going to show up.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but he didn't say for sure. But
he texted me earlier today too, so I thought he
Oh,
was
okay.
going to show up. Yeah, and he didn't say he was. Didn't say
Right.
he wasn't.
Right.
yeah, that's what I had heard
Right.
too.
Yeah.
So
Just hadn't heard from him for a little while, so.
I see someone walking in. He didn't see who it was. All right, we have a quorum, so let's start.
Hang on, let me, are you ready to go? Okay, and I'm gonna,
Recording in progress.
okay.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of November 9th, 2023. We start with any changes to the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on. Next item is public comment. This is for folks, if you want to address the Planning Commission on any item not on tonight's agenda. Things on the agenda you will be able to speak to when we get to those items. Does anyone want to speak on anything other than what's on the agenda tonight? No? Okay. And we'll move on. Next is approval of the previous meeting minutes.
So copy of the minutes were included with the packet. I also, Mike noted a couple of typos that I corrected and then sent out updated minutes based on those. They didn't change any of the substance, just simple spelling errors. So those I sent out in a subsequent correspondence. So you should have the corrected minutes for your consideration.
So I'm looking for a motion from someone to approve the minutes with any other changes.
I can approve the minutes. They look fine.
Okay, so that's a motion by Sarah. Someone want to second that?
I'll second.
Connor? Okay. Any discussion? Any changes, edits? Hearing none, then all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying or raising your hand, saying aye or raising your hand. Okay. And so no one's against and no one abstains. Thank you.
Mike, are you voting on that or no? I mean, we have enough to pass it. I just wanted to make sure that, okay.
I mean, I would be in favor of it, but.
Nope, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure I was recording it correctly.
All right, next item is public hearing on proposed amendments to Unified Land Use and Development Regulations, Section 4.4 et al., related to local resource protection. Do you want to give an intro to this?
Yep, I'll just do a quick introduction, and there's a couple of items that I wanted to highlight that are that I added since we last reviewed this. You can, so tonight this is on for a public hearing for consideration. At the end of the hearing, you can choose to make additional amendments or forward it on to the council for their consideration, or hold additional hearings if you so choose. These amendments primarily, as you recall, relate to Section 4.4, which was previously design review and is now intended to be a local resource protection section. So this includes changes to Section 4.4, Section 4.9 on non-conforming lots, structures, right-of-way, drives, and uses, Section 6.2 on subdivisions, Section 6.6 on site plan review, Article 8 on administration, Article 9 on definitions, and Article 10 on the zoning map. The bulk of the changes are included in Section 4.4 and Articles 9 and 10, and partially Article 8, just more to clarify the creation of the Local Resources Advisory Commission. So the changes that I wanted to highlight since the last time you reviewed this and set the hearing, I'm going to share my screen here quick. So under Section 4.4I and 4.4J, I added in and item 8 under 4.4I to clarify that so this is the section on listing of properties, so that any of the applications, any of the information related to the application or other items would be done by, would be paid for by whoever's making that request. So it's clear that any fees associated with the work or information that's needed would come from the applicant, whether that be the property owner or another entity. So just added that language here under item 8.
So Eric, I just want to interrupt for folks here and who may be listening. We're talking about for getting on the historic register.
That's correct. Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah. So any properties to be listed on a local register of historic places, or sorry, a local resources register, I believe is what we're calling it. Any fees associated with the application would be borne by the whoever is making that request, whether it be the property owner or another entity, because we do allow for that in the listing of properties. And then similarly in delisting of properties under item J, I've added a new item 7, basically saying the same thing, that any costs associated with the meetings or application materials to have consideration of delisting would be paid for by the property owner in this case, since it would be the property owner that would need to make that request. So they're slightly different, but providing generally the same information. So that's one change. And the other change that I realized earlier tonight is that under the definition section, and I'm gonna, apologies for the scrolling, definitions, I included certificate of appropriateness. I realized that this was actually included in the suite of amendments that were recently just approved by council. What should have actually been in here was contributing element, which is this definition now on the screen. So we can easily make that switch. If you can make that as part of your recommendation, I would say, if you do choose to forward this on to council, it can be done with those amendments. But the definition for certificate of appropriateness was just approved by council, so there's no reason to have that included again. It should have been contributing element.
Okay.
So otherwise, no differences from when this was before the Planning Commission to set this public hearing.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
I guess, sorry, Mike, did we open a hearing officially?
Oh, I guess we did.
I guess we probably should do that too.
Yeah, so in case we didn't, the public hearing on articles, on the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations is now open. So, any Planning Commission, anyone have any comments?
I'm making a different comment. I just texted back and forth with Joe, and he's trying to get in. I don't know if he's having trouble. From his end.
Why my phone was dinging too.
Yeah.
Well, he's not on my attendance list.
And the mayor will be here in 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments about this specifically from the Planning Commission?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Abby and Connor, you're okay?
Follow me.
Okay.
Anyone in the audience have any questions? I don't know if you understand what we're talking about right now, but it's we're really talking about Article 4.4, which is wording we put in to try to put restrictions on or help us save historic properties or properties with cultural significance or archaeological significance in the city. That's what we're dealing with right now.
And I would just say for folks in the room and online, typically what we'll do is take comments from people in the room first and then move to folks online for comments in the public hearing.
Yeah.
Since we do have a number of folks in both locations.
So anyone have any questions about this? Yes.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
So 4.4 is strictly.
Can I get you to come up to the microphone so folks can hear you? And introduce yourself if you would.
My name is Nick Brunel. I use they them pronouns. I guess just for clarification, 4.4 is strictly regarding the historical properties, and those amendments were added to this document prior, correct? So prior public records don't have 4.4 included into it, or?
4.4 was reserved previously, right?
4.4 exists now, but it's under the heading of design review. So it's basically a complete rewrite of section 4.4
Okay.
is what we're proposing here. There is currently a 4.4 included, and actually I will scroll back up to that section. Oh, it's wrong.
And the reason for this is primarily because we recognize that a lot of our historic properties, or maybe I shouldn't say a lot, but a significant number of historic properties have either been torn down or whatever, and we're trying to get some wording in to help save those structures that we, as a city, find important.
And the proposed amendments so far, to summarize, have mostly been about any inquiries that would maybe be submitted to the town, the inquirer would have to pay for. So
If there's any costs associated with,
those are the amendments.
with listing it on the historic register or delisting it from the register, so that it's not a burden on the city.
So I think, to be clear, just so that I understand your question, this would not relate to requesting any records that exist currently.
Oh.
The costs. What these amendments are setting out to do is to establish a local register of historic, cultural, architectural, and archaeological resources. So we have a list that we've built currently. So if people wanted to have properties added to that list or removed from that list, these amendments lay out a process and specific informational requirements and surveys and studies that need to be done to support either that listing or delisting. And the creation of those materials would be the cost of that would be the applicant would be responsible for providing the cost.
All right, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Sorry, just really quick. Can you try the other microphone? Somebody online is having difficulty hearing off of that one, and I know we have at least one that's doesn't work very well.
This
I
one
heard
works.
the tapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name's Felipe. I live on Hickok Street. I'm wondering if these amendments are setting an appropriate bar so that the city is not burdened with an excess of historically designated properties that would then inhibit updating the city housing stock to something more modern, that is more efficient in heating, that holds more families. I think it's fine to preserve historical structures, but you could run into a situation where the city's riddled with them, and then you don't have that turnover of old buildings being turned into new buildings with amenities and things that make life better in the long run.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our housing stock, there are codes that will make the housing stock safer and safe for folks living there, and that would include any historic structures. But just because a house is old doesn't mean it will make the historic register.
Sure.
There's going to be a what do we call it, design advisory committee, or I forget.
Local Resource Advisory Commission.
Yeah, that would look at properties and determine if it's got historic significance or archaeological significance or cultural significance.
But the basis for that decision isn't necessarily laid out in this document. It would just be up to the opinions of whoever's on that commission.
Yeah, but based on I guess that commission is gonna have to have some guidelines as to, you just can't look at a house and say, oh, it's, 100 years old, so it's automatically on. It's gotta have some
Yeah.
characteristics, yeah.
Okay.
And
So those have not been decided.
To my knowledge, we don't really have that laid out specifically, do we?
So
Mike, yeah, Eric's probably able to.
to the extent that we are identifying that, basically, a survey of the property needs to be conducted by a qualified historic, someone who has either an architectural historian or similar type of background that can speak to the historic, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance of the property or structure. And in that case, that would be used as a factor to determine whether or not a property would be listed or delisted. In addition, the members of the Local Resources Advisory Commission will have to have some level of expertise in architecture, history, landscape architecture, things like that. So there's an objective basis for adding or taking properties off of the list. Additionally, to your earlier question, interior changes that would do things like update HVAC systems would not be impacted by this. This
Okay.
would only impact exterior changes to a property.
All right.
Abby, do you want to add something?
Yeah, because and it's good, I guess, for my understanding too, I thought that the only things that were protected were the things that are identified on the state registry, and otherwise the owner of the property would have to be the one to bring it forward to add it to the registry. I thought that's the way that it was written.
Well, so as of right now, yes, we basically took the state's register and made that our local register. So the properties that are currently included on a state and national register and districts are what we are establishing as the local register. So these properties are already listed somewhere else. We haven't added any new properties to our list currently.
Which means that we'll be going through that process anyway.
That's correct.
We haven't listed, even though they're not listed in Winooski, the state or the national legislature will force the same process on them.
Yeah, so just to be crystal clear, like if it's not on the state or national registry, you're not going to be seeing your house added to it. It's really if you own a property and you want to add it to this registry, that's the one road in that I understand of adding to what's in the state and national registry. So I just want to make that really clear that it's not this group that's being formed isn't going to designate your house as historically significant and then add it to the registry without your.
Yeah, there needs to be consent. I mean, you may be reached out to about your property at some point.
But there's no mechanism for this group to force your house or your building or anything to be added to the registry. It's really just so there's a really clear current list that Eric could probably share that shows what properties are on the state and national registry. That's sort of what this is protecting potentially.
And I also want to make the point that even if a property is on this list, doesn't mean it can't be demolished. It's just that there's an extra review process that has to happen. So, it would be looked at on an individual basis, how important is the structure, what is its actual condition, what's being proposed. So it's not like if something is on this list, it can't ever come down.
Yes, thank you for those clarifications. But yes, that's correct.
Thanks.
I'm assuming you don't have that list right now.
I do. It's in the amendments.
But can you, just as an example.
I've seen the list.
Okay, yeah, there's not a overwhelming number of properties on those lists at this point, so. Okay. Anything else from folks here? Did you want to ask a question, sir? In the back? I saw your hand go up earlier. Are you okay? Okay, all right. How about folks online?
We do have
Anyone?
two people online with their hands raised. So first, I'll start with you, Ryan. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, my question was just clarifying the map that was produced. And there are a couple specific properties on there that I am a part owner of. And there's two different designations. There's clearly the state designation properties, but then there's some additional ones. Are those just recommended properties to be added. An example, the Monkey House, it's not like on the state registry, but that one was highlighted like purple, I think. And I'm just wondering, are those properties gonna be added automatically? And is there a process to remove a property prior to it being added to this new local registry so as not to incur costs later if needed? And then also, I do want to point out that like the previous comment made, like it may not impact the interior items of the building, but if that building is situated in such a way that it's in the middle of a lot and you have to save the exterior structure, then it does create a burden to the development of that property to add more units, which are needed in our community. So those are my 2 comments or questions.
So to your first question, Ryan, I'm gonna pull up my screen again that has the map of the properties just for clarification on what 2 properties what 2 distinctions you're referring to. Are you able to see the map, Ryan?
Yep.
So everything on here that is showing up in the kind of, I'll say the yellow color, is to be included in this, with these regulations. Those are properties that would be included in the local register. The other colors, the red, are, the distinction here is whether they're inside the downtown core zoning district or outside of the downtown core zoning district. And the reason we're distinguishing between those 2 is that properties in the downtown core zoning district have their own design review process that go through city council as part of the Act 250 amendments. So there's already a layer of review either through the state or through both the city council and the state if it gets to that point of the Act 250 amendment. So that's why we're calling out those two colors.
Okay, I guess I'm referring to a different map where there was 2 different colors where, for instance, the Winooski block was one color and then 79 LaFountain Street was a different color. And there was 2 different designations, and I don't have that in front of me right now because I'm not at my computer.
Was that one that Britta did that showed?
It shouldn't have been. It may have been, Ryan, it may have been an earlier map where we were looking at design review districts rather than the local resource protection, where we did have multiple areas highlighted on the map, but we are not, this is the only map that we are proposing to include with these amendments.
But there was a map, I think what you're referring to, Ryan, that showed properties that were significant, properties that were potentially significant, and something, I've got how she I'm pretty sure it was in.
Those were only looking at the gateways though, so Mallets Bay Avenue, Main Street, and East Allen Street, so your LaFountain Street property would have not been included on that map.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to look back. It was definitely in one of the drafts, and it showed the Winooski block as like being like a state registered property, as well as like 75 Main Street and some others, and then like I think the Monkey House and 79 LaFountain were both a different color, and it was like a proposed to be added to. And I wasn't aware that 30 Main Street, where the Monkey House is, or 79 LaFountain were on any sort of state registry or national registry.
Yeah, they're both currently listed on the state register.
Okay, so maybe it was state register versus national register?
Without seeing the map, Ryan, I'm not sure I can.
In any event, this map we're looking at right now is the map, right? Is that
That's right.
Is that right there? Yeah.
Yes.
So whatever other maps might have been out there, this is what is going to govern under this plan.
Right, this is the only map that's under consideration.
Same question, though, there's no way to preemptively exempt yourself from being on this list if you're on one of those other 2 lists.
At this point, I'm going to say there is not, but that's not to say that changes to this draft could be made before it gets adopted.
Well, and also if,
These are only properties that are already existing on this ordinance.
I
Correct.
think that's right. But what we're going for is if, Ryan, for example, if you came in with a proposal to rip down 79 LaFountain Street, it would be looked at,
Right.
correct?
That's
I
right.
mean, that's what it's about. It would be looked at by this design review commission, whatever we're calling it.
Local Resources
Local
Advisory
Resources.
Commission.
It's too long a title.
Just in,
Right,
yeah.
but it puts the burden of proof on me to
Yes.
prove that it doesn't belong.
Yes.
That's what I was getting at.
Right, or that even if, okay, also, Ryan, it could be, yes, it is listed, but you want to demolish it or change the structure, and that it doesn't, being listed doesn't necessarily mean you can't do that. It's just that there's another review
it has to
process. And I say this as someone who, you know, I understand some of the concerns about this, but I just want to be clear what's actually being proposed.
Yep, yeah, me too, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen again here. So there's only specific actions that would trigger review under these regulations. And so the covered actions are, let me zoom in on this a bit. Basically, these 7 items are what would trigger the need to be reviewed under these standards. If one of these actions is not being proposed, then there would be no reason, then you would not be subject to these regulations, or this review, I should say.
Okay.
Okay, you all set, Ryan?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else online?
If anybody else online would like to comment, you can use the raise hand feature and you can be recognized. And seeing none.
Okay. Again, any other comments from the planning commission members? Nope. Okay, so what's the wishes of the planning commission?
I was going to ask if you want to close the hearing first.
I should probably do that. I'm way
That's-
out of practice. What can I tell
That's
you?
okay.
So,
You only been doing it 22 years, right, Mike?
yeah, something like that. So, do I have a motion to close the public hearing? I suppose I should have. I see Sarah wanting to say I so move and Abby seconding
I'm
it,
happy
so.
to.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing is closed.
Sorry, who seconded that?
What's that?
Who seconded that?
Abby,
Abby,
whether she
okay.
knows it or, whether she knows it or not.
Great, thank you.
Do you have a question in the back, sir? No? Okay. So, what's the wishes of the commission? We can forward this on to the city council for their review and public hearings and approval, or we can table it and come back to it again.
I make a motion to move it forward.
Okay?
Sorry, are you moving forward what was
With-
presented with the additional
this-
definition?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify.
Yep, with the changes that you made to the document.
Do I have a
from last
second?
time.
I can second it.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Anyone opposed? No abstentions. Okay, moves on to the city council then. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you all very much.
Okay, next item on the list is, let's see, continued discussion on uniform land development, land use and development regulations, amendments related to statutory changes. This is related to Act 47.
Yes, thank you very much. So this will be a continuation of our discussion from our last meeting, where we've started looking at amendments to our land use regulations based on the statutory changes that were incorporated into Act 47. So we started looking at Article 2, which is mostly our land use table to look at some specific uses that we need to change or add or amend, and our dimensional standards. So I made some additional changes since that meeting, so I'm going to start again there. What was included with your agenda packet were changes to Article 2 and Article 5, since they have the majority of the changes so far that I think we need to incorporate to comply with Act 47. I may jump back and forth because some of the changes to the land use table are based on changes in Article 5 or some of the language in Article 5. So there may be some jumping back and forth that we'll do here, but just to set the stage for that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for y'all. So give me 1 second. Okay, so starting off again in Article 2 in Section 2.3, this is just again to clarify that there was some, we looked at this language last time, but it was a little more vague. So now we're saying that each lot shall have only one principal or primary structure. I think it said previously it said something to the effect of it's intended to have only one. So this makes it more clear that we're looking at just one principal or primary, but as many accessory structures as the lot can support. Sorry, I'm just shuffling some papers around here.
So as you go through this, if folks on the commission have questions, anyone online or folks here, just raise your hand and we'll acknowledge you, okay?
Okay, so next is our use table. So there's some additional changes here. Some of these are for, again, for clarification and consistency with the regulations. So, for example, under what used to say group home, it's now been changed to group boarding and residential care home, because that's how we refer to it in the definitions and in Article 5. So it's more just for consistency. Nothing there is changing as far as where it's permitted or what we're talking about with it. It's more just the clarification of the wording. So one of the changes that is being proposed here is under accessory dwelling unit. Since we're considering eliminating our detached cottage option, I'm incorporating this now as a permitted or conditional use. And the distinction there is state statute requires that a single unit owner occupied property be allowed to add an accessory structure as by right. So since we're looking at eliminating the detached cottage, the reason I've included this as a conditional use as well is that there may be an opportunity for a property that is either not owner occupied or developed with something other than a single unit dwelling that has the capacity to add an accessory dwelling that still meets the same definition of accessory dwelling, that being no more than 900 square feet or 30% of the primary structure, has adequate water wastewater, and meets the dimensional and parking standards for the zoning district where it's located. They could still add an accessory dwelling onto that property. So it's basically the same as the detached cottage, except we're categorizing it as basically an accessory dwelling in a situation where it's not either owner occupied or there's more than one dwelling on the property.
And that can be attached or detached from the primary structure?
It could, but it would need to be subordinate to one of the units. So it would, right. If it's, for example, if it's a multi-unit building, let's just say it's a 2-unit building, it would have to be subordinate to one of those units. It couldn't just be another unit added on to the building somewhere. Yep. It would have to be subordinate to one of those individual units.
But it could be detached?
It could also be detached, yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, provided it meets this setbacks and other dimensional standards of the zoning district where it's located.
And that's why we're getting rid of the detached cottage, because you can do a detached accessory unit, which
Correct.
is the same thing.
Correct, which is also a conditional use. So that's where this would come into play. And so section 5.1 has also been updated to reference a non-owner occupied, or a property that's either not owner occupied or is not developed with a single unit dwelling. So that's.
Any questions on that?
Eric, I have a quick question that you probably basically explained it, but so what you mentioned that some sort of accessory dwelling unit is allowed as of right, and as I understood, it's basically like if it's attached to an owner-occupied single-family dwelling. Is that right?
Close. So right now, if you have a single unit dwelling on an owner-occupied property, then you're allowed by right, by state statute, one accessory dwelling unit. That could either be attached to the existing structure or detached, provided it meets all the setbacks and parking and lot coverage standards.
And it's smaller than the primary unit or 900 square feet?
It's limited to either 30% of the primary unit or 900 square feet, whichever is greater.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so if you're in that bucket, if you will, then an accessory dwelling unit is just permitted, right?
Correct.
It's allowed. And then so let's say it's like the exact same situation except the primary dwelling is not owner occupied. Under this, you could still build the same accessory unit, but it would be a conditional use as opposed to as of right.
That's correct. Yeah, and basically yes, and we have that same process now, except we call it a detached cottage instead of an accessory dwelling.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
I know we've talked about this before. I hate to get into the weeds again, guys, but so is that the best use? The difference between? I mean, does that get us the more housing we're trying to?
Well, I think it's an option to add additional units onto properties where we wouldn't otherwise allow them.
So conditional. Can you explain again how that works? Sorry.
Yep. So conditional use is a process where it goes to the development review board for their review and consideration in conjunction with basically with site plan review. There's a public hearing that's held. So it's really the only difference in the process is that one requires a public hearing and the other can be done administratively. So if it's owner occupied, single unit, it can be an administrative approval. Even if it's an owner-occupied 2-unit building, it would still have to go through conditional use approval. The only allowance right now for the administrative approval is single-unit owner-occupied property.
Owner-occupied property, they have the right to put in an accessory.
That's
unit
correct.
Or a
Right,
second.
and what would
or a
be the
second.
conditions in which you wouldn't get the conditional use on the not owner occupied property?
Well, that's a good question. So there's an entire section of the regulations, I believe it's 6.7 under conditional use review that outlines standards of that review. So it talks about things, and I hate to use this one because statute has also changed to put some limitations on it, but things like character of the area, impacts on water, wastewater, impacts on road networks, impacts on other facilities, community facilities or otherwise. So it's more of a specific review of the impacts, I would say, rather than the project itself, to have some conditional review. In some cases, so I've seen these go forward both. I've seen these go forward as conditional use and be approved or denied. And in the cases where they've been denied, there's been concern over how parking is being added onto the property to support the new dwelling and the size of the dwelling in comparison to the overall lot itself and other structures in and around the area. So, but like I said, those standards have also been amended by statute. The character of the area have been. Well, it can't be used as I forget exactly what Act 47 says, but it's, yeah. So
I guess I know we've done this before. I know we've talked about this in the past, but why are we separating the two? If they're both going to be.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Sarah. It's like, what if the only, at least in the case where the only difference is whether the primary structure is owner occupied, it seems to me that shouldn't be a basis to like deny one accessory dwelling unit allow another one as of right.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, so I'd say it this way: we have to allow it by right for owner occupied. So we could make them both allowed by right. We couldn't make them both conditional.
Right.
So Connor, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, actually, I was going to kind of make the same point that Brendan just made. And so if the considerations for conditional use, I assume are the same considerations for permitted use anyway.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in favor of just having both by right.
So by right, though, they have to come to you, administrative approval.
Right. They need to get a zoning permit.
And they have to meet the setbacks and,
Yep.
and all the different requirements of the zone.
Yep, absolutely. They'd have to meet all the dimensional standards, parking standards. They'd have to meet all the requirements of the zoning district where they're located.
So right now, we're talking about if you have a single unit that's either owner-occupied or not owner-occupied, by right being allowed to put in an accessory unit.
Well, if I understand it correctly, what we're talking about is in any of the residential districts, if you have the space to put an accessory dwelling, regardless of how it's developed, you can add an accessory dwelling. Am I understanding that correctly from you, Sarah, Connor, and from you guys? Is that what you're?
I think that's what I'm saying. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
again,
Okay.
I know we actually went through this a few years ago, and there were reasons that we left it this way or created this language, and I guess times are different. There's just so much demand now and need for housing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Abby, do you remember any of that stuff?
Oh, Abby,
Abby's
your
got
mic.
the best, she's got the best memory of all of us, so.
I know, you on mute.
Your mic is not working again.
There was one. Yeah.
So I guess I was a little confused because the accessory dwelling unit is a right if for a single unit property.
Owner
That's
occupied.
Owner occupied.
Yes.
And what we were talking about
Yeah.
is a single unit
I think I-
property that's either owner occupied or not, that allowing that accessory unit by right.
I think we're talking about that, and if it's not developed with a single unit property, if it's developed
So
with
if
a
it's a
2-unit
duplex-
or 3-unit or whatever,
Yeah,
that they could add an accessory dwelling if
they meet all the.
they meet all the other
requirements.
standards, right?
Okay.
Lot coverage, setbacks, parking, et cetera, for the property,
Yeah, so that'd be an administrative approval as opposed to
as opposed to conditional use.
conditional use.
Yeah.
And if they came in that circumstance,
A little bit.
if they came to
I
you
think- I
looking
think
for an
Abby's
administrative
back,
permit,
so,
you
See,
could
Gabby's back.
push it up to DRB if there was a question in your mind.
Yes, I mean, anything could go forward to the Development Review Board if there's something where there's a concern or would need some additional review or consideration.
Yeah, like if they wanted to encroach in a setback by 6 inches.
Well, if they want to do,
Something
so
stupid.
that's a different case. If they needed a waiver for something,
Yeah.
if they needed to encroach into the setbacks, then that would require a waiver, which is conditional use through the DRB.
Right, right.
Or,
Okay.
sorry, is a waiver process through the Development Review Board.
Okay.
So, all right, Abby, let's give it one more try.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the reason we left it as conditional use for the non-owner occupied was like a couple different reasons, but one was acknowledging this vast investment from non-Winooski people into Winooski, buying up owner-occupied homes and then developing for income. And so taking homes and putting them into rental market, that is quite expensive. So like, it was one way to sort of keep people, like, hey, you live in Winooski, you can throw this ADU in the back and have an income stream that will keep you in Winooski. And it was also a way to, with all of the short-term rental developments that are happening, a way to have an owner on site to deal with any of the externalities of the short-term rental. And that there was still a pathway for people who are just investing and not living in Winooski to do a detached building, add buildings to their property, but that it would have, you would have a process where the public would be able to come in and learn about it and have a say, in that process, right? So it's like acknowledging that Winooski is heavily invested in city,
there's been a lot of interest in retaining our residents and providing pathways for ownership. One way somebody could become an owner here in Winooski is to have this income generating building versus somebody coming in has no interest in doing anything but making money off of Winooski and having rents or having short-term rentals. You know, in the case of my neighbor who went through the detached cottage process for short-term rental and now has the front, her main building is short-term rental too. So it's like a hotel next door. So it's sort of like providing the community a little bit more of a voice in that process, and then maybe incentivizing people to stay here or live in Winooski as like a primary residence.
Yeah. That's also what I recall, but I felt like it was worth kind of going around it again, since times are different. But
I mean, that makes logical sense to me in terms of like intention, but I'm curious. I'm sure like in that period, we don't have any type of analysis or study around the impact, right? It's just like such a short period of time, and it's that data is probably just hard to gather anyway. But I'm wondering if that would be better regulated through like use case regulation, like just like regulating short-term rentals rather than at that front end of like development.
And I will say the city is in the process now of developing as part of the municipal code, regulation for short-term rentals that I think the way it's drafted right now is that there's at least a registry that folks need to sign up for and get licensed annually. And potentially there is an option for city council to put a cap on the number of short-term rentals. And there is a distinction between hosted versus unhosted, as far as if it's their home that they rent out during the year and they live there when it's not being rented versus it's just a landlord, or it's being used for rental income. The owner does not live there or has no affiliation to the property other than renting it. So anyway, that's something that's in process, completely separate from our processes, as that would land in another part of municipal regulation, not in the land use code.
But it does sort of affect our thinking a bit.
It does, but it could, I should say.
Okay.
So we can change it to being permitted for anything, or leave it permitted conditional with the additional information included in section 5.1, but I'm fine either way.
So let's see, anyone in the audience here want to make any comments? Can you hear okay, by the way? Yeah. Okay.
I was curious if...
Can you come up?
Can you come up, because they got to pick it up on the Zoom.
I was curious, given the attendance here, if someone on the council could move up the public hearing on this topic, this agenda topic. Because I think most people here in attendance just want to communicate the urgency. This
isn't a public hearing. It's just, we're taking comments on, or we're discussing this, because we haven't adopted it at this point.
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
But
so we can we can make comments on anything regarding the ULUDR.
Well, what I thought we'd do is we go through them, each item that Eric talks about. If you have questions about that, let's talk about it, rather than, so we can handle it, right then and there.
Gotcha.
I know it's a pain. It gets dragged out. We're scheduled to end at 8. It may go longer. We'll see.
Yeah.
I apologize for that, but that's the process, I guess.
Sure.
I will say, if anyone in the audience has to leave and wants to make a point, I'm happy to have you come up. Okay?
Yeah, at the risk of overstepping and speaking too strongly for everyone else, I'd say probably most people here just want to communicate the urgency of the current situation to the Planning Commission and not speak to specific line items in the amendments.
Okay.
And the proposed amendments.
So,
I don't know how you want to handle that, and I understand that it's sort of bizarre and not.
But you know what I mean?
Not typical,
We want to give you the chance to address us. So Yeah, I'm gonna pause this right now then, Eric.
Well, I was going to say, Mike, I'm wondering if the comments are being, the general comments on housing should have come forward under public comment at the top of the meeting,
Yeah,
since they're not related to the specific amendments that we're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
Got it. That was unclear
yeah.
at the beginning. Okay.
I don't know if we
Yeah,
want to.
and I apologize.
Do we want to reopen that quickly?
So let's pause and we'll go back to public comment and I'll let you folks here or anyone online.
And it might have been a little confusing because we were having a public hearing about the other
Right.
4.4. So we got a little
Right.
mushed up in there. Okay.
And I'll also just note that I'm not going to say the same comments, but similar comments were raised at the city council meeting on Monday night.
Yeah.
And the mayor was going to provide some context under city updates, but the mayor is on now, just
The mayor is
FYI.
on now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay,
So,
yeah. But I know that I invited folks to come tonight because I heard their concerns the other night. So let's pause and go back to public comment.
before we do that, there's a person online who had their hand raised, so I don't know if it's in context to the discussion on detached cottage / accessory dwelling or not. So, do we want to recognize them first?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Evan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Cool. Yeah, so I have comments on particular like zoning issues. I'm happy to hold them there on the accessory dwelling units. So yeah, my name is Evan Gould. I'm actually a Burlington resident. I'm on the DRB in Burlington, but I've worked closely with Burlington, like as a member of the public in their planning commission's Act 47 changes called the Neighborhood Code, and I can speak more about that during public forum. But on the accessory dwelling units, I would encourage just a permitted use regardless of ownership of the unit. At the end of the day, the thing that is actually crippling people's ability to afford homes is the amount of their income that they have to spend on rent. And so I understand that we want things to be an avenue to homeownership, but if people cannot save money, they're not going to be able to save for a home. And so increasing housing supply should be the primary focus. And I think limiting the barriers to ADUs is a good way to do that. Looking through data-driven, the amount of permit applications in Burlington, which is much larger and has much larger population, there were less than 117 permits applied for ADUs in the city. So, and I think that it's not a particularly restrictive process. On the DRB, we don't have to see a ton of them. When we do, they're pretty much rubber stamped. But even with that, uptake is pretty low. So I think lowering the barrier to entry is important with regards to this particular line item. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Evan.
Evan, can I ask you a question? Since
Yeah.
you're very familiar with the Burlington Code, are there ADUs, are they permitted if you're not owner occupied in Burlington?
They're not, no, yeah, they're not. But we are, so that's a neighborhood code part. So, and some of the changes are actually not just ADUs, but allowing more than one primary dwelling unit on a lot is some of the proposed changes as part of that to allow a form of missing middle housing called cottage courts. But those primary dwelling units are slightly smaller, so they have footprints kind of matching what ADUs look like, but without being an purely accessory dwelling unit. But yeah, they have to be owner occupied in Burlington.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Okay, let's come back here. Would anyone like to address the council? Oh, sorry, I forget where I was. The planning
promoted.
Hey, you put it in my head, Sarah. The planning commission on items related to, I'm assuming you're all here about housing. Whoever wants to come up, please, feel free. Sir, I would ask you to just sit down at this microphone closest to me and state your name so that they can get it for the record. Yep, right here, right there is perfect. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Hydro Samurai, and I just have a few stuff to say about housing.
Yep.
What do you have to say to to families who are currently having housing problems, and including other families who are having difficult, let's say, maintaining their house because of how old it is, or, I've been in certain situation where I have to call, the landlord for at least 10 times this week because the basement kept flooding, and just over various things, we would get a no specifying that we shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be doing that. And I get that as a landlord, you have plenty of other responsibilities, but the responsibilities that should be taken seriously is families who have children in their home who are breathing this toxic smell, and is currently being taken granted, and in other immigrants' houses as well.
So, I hate to say it this way, but that's really not an issue that we deal with, but I would suggest, we do have a building code enforcement.
Sorry to interrupt, but that wasn't my question. My question was, other than this type of problem, there is a lot of problem that, that immigrants suffer because of housing, and, other than immigrants, I'm sure there are other people who are suffering with housing problems.
Right.
So what can we do to take,
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is, what we deal with is zoning regulations, not that. So I'm trying to answer your question best I can. We have a building code enforcement office. They deal with issues with housing. So if you have concerns, your landlord is not, and I know the mayor's on the line, she can step in and correct me if I'm misspeaking, but you can talk to them about issues that the landlord is not addressing.
Mhm.
Am I correct in that?
Yeah,
Eric,
so
or-
we do it through, so a couple things. The city has what we call a minimum housing complaint form. Really, that's used for any property, whether you own it, whether you rent, whatever the case might be, that you're having some issue with the property, whether it be the landlord's not responsive to fixing a leak of the faucet, whether there's trash on the neighboring property that's collecting and it's bringing in rodents, things like that. We use that as the process to start our investigation of these issues, and then that's when our code enforcement folks are able to go out and start actually making contact with the landlord, come and visit the property to see what actually is happening, to see if there's any other violations that you're not aware of that may need to be corrected in conjunction with that, and start working with the property owner to correct those issues. There's also, we're looking at I see the mayor has her hand up, so I'm going to defer to her quickly. So, Mayor Lott.
Thanks. We are actively in the process of updating the ordinance that regulates that code enforcement that Eric was speaking to, trying to clarify definitions and process so that it's easier for our code enforcement staff to actually hold landlords accountable for things like that. There's a public hearing scheduled for December 4th of those changes. Pending public input, I anticipate we will adopt those changes in order to move forward with having a better process in place. We are also working with the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity to provide training and info sessions in the community to help residents understand that they have these rights and how to access them to ensure that they are receiving safe housing, that they know what their rights are, and they know who they can reach and how they can reach someone if their landlord isn't meeting those minimum housing qualifications.
Thank you.
It's been a known problem that we have needed to address for a while, and I'm sorry that it's taken this long, but we are trying to improve that process now.
Christine, would his first step tonight get one of those forms that Eric was
yes.
talking about?
I
Probably.
can drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, and we have those here at City Hall, and they're on our
Oh, great.
website, so you can fill them out electronically and submit them that way, or fill them out in person and hand them in. You don't have to provide your name, so you can do it anonymously as well, so that there's potentially not any retribution from a landlord or property owner. But that's the process that we use to start our enforcement actions, to do our investigations, and to make sure that it's in our system, so we can follow up and have that mechanism to continually make sure we're updating our records and reviewing the property to see, one, what the issues are, and two, to make sure that the changes are being addressed.
Eric, are those forms right out by the window?
That's a
or
good question. They might be. I'm going to go check really quick.
Go check, and if they are, why don't you bring one in for them? So I hope that helps you. Hopefully answers your question, and as the mayor said, the quality of our housing stock is important to the city, and that's why we have this we call it the rental registry, where we go out and inspect residential units every so many years. I forget, is it now 3 years or every 4 years?
Every 4 years, unless a property comes online, or if there is an issue, they will re-inspect until those issues are addressed.
Right. So as the mayor said, the council is working to strengthen those regulations. And anyone who's interested in the meeting she talked about with CVOEO.
December 4th, right?
The public hearing is December 4th.
Yeah.
Mayor, when is the information meeting?
The info meeting, the date is not set yet. We have one for, we're doing a series of them in various language groups. So we have one coming up December 2nd for Nepali speakers, but we're working to set a new date for other language groups. We've done a couple, but plan to continue doing them.
Okay, so there's one scheduled December 2nd for the Nepali folks?
Yeah, the next one will be before January 14th. We just haven't settled on the date, and we'll push that out through our channels when that's available. Okay. Through like Facebook and the city updates and all the.
It'll be on the website. It'll be on the website. So you can, if you look at the Winooski website, you'll see when those are. Okay?
Great.
Thanks for coming. Okay. Anyone else? Any issue with housing? I know that there were comments at the city council meeting. If you want to reiterate those here tonight, you're more than welcome to. No? Yes. I'm sorry, your name again was?
Yes, my name's Nick. So I'd like to kind of just quickly say that while I'm very grateful that the state helped pass the Homes Act and similar things, I feel like it is kind of up to the Winooski City Council, our local government, to try and push for more than what is just sort of the minimum of what is like required. I feel that Winooski, like many cities and many towns in our state, we are experiencing a housing shortage, whether it be rental or whether it be purchasing homes. And what I would really like to see us be able to do is try and push more towards building more housing, and not just individual homes, but more like apartment buildings, trying to help with allowing that in our city. I feel that like small additions to previously existing homes can really only add so much. If you have a house that is being used for renting out to other people that can only house, it's a 4-unit, 3-unit building, and that's already sitting on another lot, you can only add so much to that lot. And I do feel that we should really be prioritizing building much larger and more housing for people, while also ensuring that that housing is affordable. As you know, more than 60% of Winooski are renters, and the average income is roughly around the same average income as the state, around like $40,000. Many people are not renting because they are choosing to necessarily, but because that's really our only option. What I would really like to see, I've said it a couple times, is more large-scale housing. I think we really need to build or encourage building more affordable housing that can fit many families.
Are you saying housing for, to purchase or for rental or both?
I think mostly for rental. I think as it stands, someone made a previous comment, but people aren't buying houses because, some people can't buy houses because they just can't find it, or it's perhaps a little bit out of the price range. I think the majority of people in Winooski aren't buying houses because they just don't have enough money to buy a house, period. Whether that you're talking prior to 2020, or right now. I just think that a large population of Winooski are renters. We don't necessarily have as many rights as a property owner would have. And so I feel that the best possible option that the city can do is going forward with a plan that helps to bring more housing on a large scale to people, rather than focusing on, really converting, a single, whether the owner of the home is living in it or not. I feel that it's a Band-Aid solution. I don't believe that is necessarily going to really solve anything. We might have, a couple more people will be able to find homes in Winooski, but there's still a large portion of people that will not be able to move here, or if they find themselves not being able to live where they currently are, they're still sort of, they might have to move somewhere else.
Well, that's basically the issue we're dealing with is housing, and one thing we've talked about considerably at this commission and with the city council is how do we try to get larger units, 3-4 bedroom units built to take care of families. I think you at the council meeting, and I forget your name, sir, I'm sorry. Talked about there are families who have 11 people living in a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, need bigger units. And that's one of the things we're trying to figure out. How can we spur that type of development as opposed to what we've seen over the last several years, which is predominantly studio efficiency and 1-bedroom units that are being built. Something we're wrestling with, so I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, again, it's hard for us to control what the developers build. We can incentivize, but they are for profit for the most part, and it's the lower income stuff has to come from sort of a different, Mary can probably speak a little better on this, but we can't just simply say to developers, we want all this low income housing and not make it viable financially for them to be able to do. It's really frustrating, honestly. We've had a lot of frustrated and heartfelt conversations over the years on this here. And we're trying. Believe us, we are trying, but it's tough.
Yeah, I think to Sarah's point, one of the things that we found, and I've only been on this commission for a little more than 2 years, so most of my colleagues have been at this a lot longer than me, is we have our gateway zoning districts, so basically Mallett's Bay Ave, Main Street, and Allen Street, where the process for building like large scale rental properties is like administratively easier, and that's why you do see more big buildings going up in those areas. But what we've found is the market, developers will say, and there's reason not to believe them, that they make the most money and there's the most demand for studios and 1-bedrooms. And so there's a real shortage of housing that fits families and just larger groups of people living together. And so I think we've now become cautious about just sort of trying to make it easy to build without sort of trying to direct what type of housing is being built. And we, just a few months before Act 47 was passed, we did make some fairly substantial changes to our zoning regulations to try to encourage more affordable housing. It's basically, you could get incentives to build more if you build units with 3 more bedrooms and or that were affordable. And now Act 47 has kind of subsumed some of those changes, and so we're working through what to do more about it. But we certainly, we appreciate your comments, and we understand it's really difficult, and it's hard for a little commission like us and frankly a little city like Winooski when there's these really big regional and national market forces. But we do, we hear you, and we appreciate it.
And feel the same way. I mean, a lot of us feel the same way. We would prefer to see that kind of housing going in that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate it. I still feel like there is, I know obviously it's not an easy task, but I do feel that we can do more to, incentivize building, but it doesn't just have to be necessarily housing. I know that Winooski as well, we don't have a lot of, I wouldn't say commercial development, but I suppose, sort of what I think it could possibly help Winooski in getting more apartments built, getting more outside developers to invest in Winooski, is also helping with building like necessary businesses as well. Winooski itself doesn't necessarily have a large grocery store, and we mostly have like a lot of small markets, which are really great to visit. But probably the largest market that I've been to since living here was probably commodities, which has since closed down.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something of a void that the city is also missing, is a more centralized place where people can go and get their groceries. Markets are great, especially because a lot of the markets are also owned by like New Americans, and it gives people a chance to run their own business. But I do feel like there's, in general, and I don't want to take much more time, but there's more that we can do to incentivize growth within the city, incentivize more housing being developed for more people. And I think there's things that we can do that could make that also affordable for people that are living here as well. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And any specific ideas you have, feel free to let us know. Yes, sir.
Hi again. My name is Patrice Lumumba, and I sympathize with him basically on housing. I work at Winooski School District, and I advocate a lot on the housings. I know you guys are talking more about building some stuff on other housing so people can, I guess you can open up more housing for people on their own property. But if you guys think about buying people out to develop more housing for people, we know that housing are big issues in Winooski especially. And like we say multiple times, many families come to Winooski because of diversity, right? And many are leaving because lack of housing. And that's the biggest thing in Winooski. I work at Winooski, many staff are leaving because of lack of housing. I've talked many places before about family being in small housing and how it doesn't meet the city code many times. And again, like you said, like what can you guys do for low income family? What can you guys do for minority family? And again, this is not the thing that they ask for, but I think that I just don't know what can you guys really do for many families like myself, like others are in this room right now, because I know housing is a big deal. It's no easy task, of course, but it's a lot of process. But my question is like, can we buy people out to build more affordable housing, bigger housings, right?
Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. We, the planning commission, can't. We don't have a budget. I don't know if the mayor wants to step in and answer this, but that's a difficult question. I know what you're saying, and I think Sarah or someone may have said it. We can set up the zoning regulations to try to incentivize people to build more housing and maybe build more affordable housing. But we don't do that. It's the developers. And so we need to get developers who maybe build not the affordable, not the upper end stuff, but, you know, one of the missing pieces in housing is the middle type, you know, beginner type homes and that type of thing. And obviously affordable units, but affordable units with the cost of land and the cost of building, it's difficult for a private developer to put up an affordable project. One of the things that was mentioned the other night was, I know some towns have inclusionary zoning. Yeah, sorry. Inclusionary zoning that requires you to build so many affordable units. That's something I think we have to talk about. Whether we ultimately go that route, I can't say. That is one strategy that is in place I know in Burlington. South Burlington have it too?
Yep, I believe they do.
South Burlington. So communities have it. So it's something that will help get affordable units in from for-profit developers. The risk is, okay, if you do that, will they come? There's a lot of different pieces that have to be considered. But I think we're gonna have to take a serious look at inclusionary zoning, especially given I know that the direction that the council appears to be going and the input that we've been getting and the issues that are around affordability for housing, not only in Winooski, but in Chittenden County and the whole state. It's a very difficult issue. So I hear you. I appreciate your comments. I hope that somewhere, somehow, the problem gets solved. We'll do what we can to help, but I'm not sure that we can do a lot to require.
Yeah, no, and again, that's why I ask. I mean, I'm asking for you guys to, at least consider that, look
Yeah.
into it, right? Because, like I said, I think a lot of people are moving out of Winooski.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's not a blind side to you guys. I work at Winooski. I know families leaving every single year
Yeah.
because of lack of housing, and it's a big, big issue. I come from this community,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not saying you guys will change this today or tomorrow, but I think it's something to look at and ways we can, talk logistics about with families and what can we do to make sure family stays here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're really going to be just a white cities, so we have to kind of think that.
Well,
So-
and I will agree with you that the diversity we have in this community is a positive factor in the city. It's a great thing that we have. I mean,
Yeah, but before
I
you know
I
it,
grew up and it wasn't like that.
yeah, you're right. But before you know it, you guys will lose it all, and it will
Yeah.
be tough to get people here.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about we want to pay people to move to Vermont, but where?
Right.
Right. So
Right.
we need to think about that for a second for our city if we want to keep the diversity. So
Yeah.
that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mayor Lott, I see you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of build off of what Mike was saying, and I would like the public comments to continue. These are similar in vein to what we heard at Monday's city council meeting. And the reality is, the housing situation is there are many factors impeding what we need to have here. Part of it is zoning. There are things we can do in zoning to make stronger incentives. Potentially, I think we need to do more research into this, but what can we require? But we also need to come at this from an ordinance perspective, which doesn't happen through land use regulations. Things like replacement ordinance requiring if you tear something down to redevelop it, you also include the same kind of units that you got rid of. And that's work that we're gonna have to run through our housing commission. So I don't want our planning commission to feel like there's nothing they can do about the housing situation here, but I also don't want to feel like this is the only answer and like this is the only body responsible. There are a lot of pieces here and we all need to be contributing to addressing that. We did at the city council meeting vote to provide some direction to both planning and housing commission on where we are headed. I was saving that for city updates per kind of just our functionality, but well, I'll paste it into the chat. It's not formatting well, but essentially, we very much want to prioritize the preservation of existing, what we've been referring to as priority housing, and that is affordability, like 3+ bedrooms to keep families here in home ownership opportunity. And so we are looking towards, as we move through updating in response to the Homes Act, how can we think about changes that will preserve that priority housing? And then also asking our housing commission to think about what are new mechanisms that we need to have in place to do that for us.
I attended the meeting on Monday too, and I came away, I was gonna actually bring it up at the end of our meeting as well, but I think we've talked about this before, but there's part of me that thinks, can we have some sort of a joint meeting with housing, with this commission? I mean, it just feels like, I don't know how we'd structure it or what we'd really talk about, but I often feel like I'm talking in the abstract. I mean, and Christine, you and I have talked about this in the past, you know, are we talking 200 3+ bedrooms? Are we talking 50? Are we talking 25? Are we talking, how much low-income housing does the city really need? You know, how much market housing would we like to have to increase the bottom line, the grand list? I mean, to take it out of this sort of abstract, and I don't know, can people from the public sometimes even understand the level that we're talking at? And could we get it down to really talking about numbers and saying, okay, how do we get, 15 3+s or whatever these numbers are? And so I wondered if talking with housing and seeing if they have a better idea of what are we, and then we can actually look at property within the city and maybe even target some of those properties. There were 2 listed today that I saw, and I thought, boy, both of those would be ideal. I mean, they're in the market, they're just listed with real estate agents, would be ideal ones to convert. I think one was on Maple, and I don't know, see what I don't know if anyone else feels like that would be useful to try to get a more group effort.
Actually, go ahead, Christine.
Mike raised it to me. I've talked with him about it before. We just have to figure out what the timing is right there, like what makes sense for where you're at in your process. Housing is wrapping up the short-term rental stuff, and then they'll move on to the next thing. And so we just have to figure out the timing on that, but it will happen.
Okay, good.
Yeah, or even inviting, is she the housing director, the new position? Inviting her to one of our planning commission meetings, just to sort of give us like a little bit of a summary of what they're working on and like how it could better align with our work. Because I do think we keep trying to incentivize stuff, but our incentives are never that great because we're a pretty easy place to develop, right? We have like a pretty low bar for development, so it seems like, I don't know, we have our incentives in place for a couple weeks. We'll see if that's done anything, but that's what I'm always struggling with is like, what are the levers that we actually have and how do we successfully use them to create this type of housing that we've been talking about for a long time?
Yeah, agreed.
So as the mayor said, there's different levels. There's us, the planning commission, there's the housing commission that's dealing with this topic, and the city council. And so trying to get our heads together to address it is what we're looking at.
So, Mike, I just want to point out that we have 2 people online that have their hands raised as well, just for your information.
Philippe, I think you want to.
Yeah.
Oh, you're sitting there. I'm assuming you want to address us.
Yeah. No, I found a comfier chair.
Okay.
Now
move on.
Yeah, the point very well taken and completely agree. I mean, the planning commission's not going to go out and get a loan from the bank and start building housing, right? But what you guys can do is liberalize further the zoning code. So I think currently, and even the proposed amendments prescribe lot sizes that I think are excessive for the number of units that you would want to build on there. We were just having the discussion about accessory dwelling units. Why couldn't I, as the owner of a 50 by 100 foot lot, build 3 units in the back? I feel like that should be perfectly acceptable, and everyone should feel good about that because it's providing 3 more homes for people in need. Land costs, you rightly mentioned, are a huge component of the affordability issue, and land costs here are high. So that would then prescribe the need to fit as many units as you could possibly fit on any one parcel of land. So that means minimizing setback requirements, minimizing lot size requirements, maximizing minimum height requirements further than what the zoning commission has, the planning commission has proposed and has put in their amendments. So those are my ideas, right? And I know that sometimes you guys hold out on some of that stuff as for the purpose of providing incentives to developers. Okay, if you build 3+ bedrooms or something, then you can breach these rules or whatever. But that also adds cost, right? They got to come here. They've got to make the proposal. They've got to hear public comments. I just think that if you allow more of this stuff by right, someone earlier mentioned the Burlington Neighborhood Code. I think they're doing great work in minimizing lot sizes and maximizing minimum height requirements. So we could look across the river and see the positive changes that they're doing. Their density is, they're obviously a bigger city, but their density is on par with ours. So there's no reason why a good idea over there wouldn't also be a good idea here in Winooski.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here before I take the folks online? Nope. Okay. Eric, you want to?
Sure. Colin, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Colin Larson. I live in Burlington. I've also, like Evan, been involved as a member of the public with the neighborhood code process. I wasn't quite sure what the public comment format was going to be here, but because this is the general comment, I do want to respond to some stuff that's come up and kind of frame this for you all. I think the Planning Commission here is really selling themselves short with how much power they actually have here. I understand that there are market forces at a regional and national level that are affecting the ability to build housing. Lending is costly, or borrowing is costly. We don't have a lot of labor supply. But zoning is the tool that has restricted housing more than any other factor over the past 4 decades in the United States, right? The fact that the majority of Winooski's land has been zoned exclusively for single-family detached homes since, I don't know when your zoning code was updated last. That is why we are in the situation we're in. It was the same in Burlington, it's the same in South Burlington, it's the same in every other state. Look, you can look at California, which is the only state that's worse than Vermont when it comes to homelessness, right? So when we're talking about creative solutions to addressing the housing crisis, I don't really understand the degree to which everyone is wedded to our existing zoning code. You can go through this and cross out probably half the regulations right now, and it will materially impact the ability to construct additional units in Winooski. Some of this stuff's been mentioned, right? Minimum lot sizes. They're enormous. in your residential districts, right? Setback requirements. The fact that you can't build multiple freestanding structures on a lot. That all of this stuff is out there. And I think that the Planning Commission is, from what I've heard, right, you're trying to maintain the existing building mass, density of Winooski and add housing, which you can't do. You need additional housing. And I'll make an additional, point here. Urbanization density will be good for Winooski. The only way that you can grow the grand list right now is by adding infill development. And when you grow the grand list, you increase municipal revenues. That allows additional public services. There was a gentleman speaking about, well, can the town buy people out and create housing that way? You can't right now because you don't have the money. But if you had additional density, that is something you could do. Social housing, projects like that, public funding to intervene where the market will not provide housing, that's only possible when you have the tax revenue to do that. And that's only possible when you have additional density. So, I think I'm at times very perplexed that zoning departments, zoning commissions, they're not really willing to question everything about the zoning code and why is it in place right now, and does it help us? Because that's the process that you need to be undertaking here if you really want to add to the housing supply. And yes, I understand, right? There are additional factors, but you can do more. You do have the power. And I think that should make you feel good because you don't have to sit here and twiddle your thumbs and tell people, well, there's only so much you can do. There's a lot you can do. And so there's one more thing that I want to note. Earlier this week, there was a presentation before the Joint Fiscal Committee and the state legislature about the housing gap. So I don't know if you have heard this number from last year from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, but the state will need 30 to 40,000 year-round homes by 2030, which means that there's more than 4,000 homes constructed per year. So last year in the state, which was the most built since 2006, only about 2,000 homes were built. And this doesn't account for population growth, which we need. And this doesn't account for housing units falling out of the supply, which you also need to account for. So realistically, we're going to need even more than 40,000 units by 2030. So imagine how many units you think we need, and then triple it, because that's how many units we actually need. So what I'm trying to say here is you really need to get creative, and you really need to understand that there are a lot of tools in your toolkit that you haven't even touched yet. You're trying to inch your way around the margins. And the state's Housing and Community Development Agency has said specifically that that's not going to work in this situation. We can't just throw money at the problem and not change the regulatory regime and expect that things are going to get better, because they're not. So anyway, okay. I know I've said a lot. I'm very passionate about this.
I can hear it in your voice.
Okay.
Thank you, Colin.
I'll leave it.
All right. You have one more?
Yep, we have, let's see, Evan Gould again. So Evan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I just thought I'd get in the kind of the rest of my thoughts as part of this. Versus, I'm happy to also speak on line items, but I just wanted to put some of the numbers in perspective of what is proposed as far. So one of the things, right, lot sizes. So Winooski has 7,500 and 8,500 square foot lot sizes. Only a little over half of all lots in the city meet that 7,500 square foot lot size. So almost half of the lots in the city are non-compliant with the current zoning regulations in the proposal. And if you go up to the 8,500 number, it's 612. So more than half of those lots are not, do not meet those requirements. If you look at the triplex requirements that you're proposing, there's 79 lots on the grand list that actually meet the 17,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. So 79 lots in the city that are available to be used as triplexes, which can be a nice, like, affordable housing option for a lot of people. And when you get up to quadplexes, which I think staff mentioned last time, you're down to 40 units. And then I think also something to keep into account, look at the existing character of Winooski. Looking at the grand list right now, 92 Spring Street is on a 1,300 square foot lot. You could drive by that house. It's a single floor ranch. It fits into the neighborhood character. And when you're talking about that, and you look at a single family home there that potentially is affordable, and you look at infill development, and you're talking these lot sizes that you're trying to require, that's 4 of these houses potentially on what is the minimum lot size for a duplex. So I think one of the things that has been the guiding light for the neighborhood code, because I think Burlington and Winooski have a lot in common, right? They developed in and around like the 1800s majority, and a lot of the housing stock was built there in early 1900s. They're industrial towns that have modernized and changed in a lot of ways, but a lot of that housing stock that people are able to buy is no longer able to be built in a lot of these places, or is even illegal where it currently stands. And so I think re-legalizing what's on the ground would be a good way to continue the growth of Winooski without changing, right? We're not talking like increasing height requirements, but just allowing these infill developments wherever they can be fit, both preserves the existing housing stock, which I think is a problem because the current regulations at these large lot sizes require the developers either merge lots or demolish existing structures to build new housing, which is pushing out the people who are living in those affordable units now versus, how different is it if there's a flag lot on a particularly deep lot where somebody can build, an alleyway that accesses the property in the rear, and that's a new affordable unit that gets built in that place. So I really do, if none of you have looked at the neighborhood code presentations, that stuff is all available online. And I think the strides that it's trying to make to actually help and solve the housing crisis can help inform the decisions here, hopefully.
Great. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Evan.
And Mike, can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
It sounds like Evan did some good research. I'm wondering if he can provide that to Eric for us to review.
Well, and Abby, I have a lot of that same data already that I've done analysis on for our properties. You may recall, it's been a couple years now, but when we made some amendments to the RC dimensional standards, we looked at basically every lot to see the lot size, lot frontage and depth, right, to make sure that it matched with what we were doing. And we did make some changes based off that analysis. So, I'd be happy to look at what he has, but I also have a lot of that same data.
Okay. So it is 8:07. You guys all set? Okay, perfect. I think I'm getting tired, so I'm gonna see if we can stop. Anything else you want to? I know we're right in the middle of it.
No, I don't think at this point. I think we can definitely pick back up at our next meeting on specific changes.
Yeah. And I apologize for the confusion at the beginning on public comment, but hey, it is what it is, and we got through it. So. Okay, so let's move on to the next agenda item, which is city updates. Eric and Mayor?
So I'll let the mayor lead off.
Okay, so as I already spoke to a little bit earlier, we had a public hearing on the previous amendments you all had set forward on Monday. We did pass those amendments. Very pleased to say that.
Yay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That public hearing, themes trended similar to this, right? Like, they circled around this, frankly, a growing problem of displacement of existing families and residents in Winooski, which I believe from some real and some anecdotal data is actually a growing concern here, and council does too, from both a lack of affordable housing, units large enough to hold families, and development changing what's available. We also expressed concern or heard concern in the public hearing about how that impacts the newly renovated school building that we have. We're actually seeing declining enrollment even though previously we've been projected to increase. There is, I think, frustration around the incentives that have been in place. You know, you all worked to update those last year because the initial incentives in form-based code, like the bonus story, wasn't functioning. We made changes last year. I don't know if those have been effective or not. I do know that at least 2 different developers have declined to use them, saying that they weren't strong enough incentives to create those priority housing units of like 3-bedroom or affordable. And I think that is connected to some of the public comment we're hearing. Like there's frustration about displacement, changes that are happening, and the incentives that we do have not functioning. So the council wanted to provide direction to the planning commission because we are going to, you all are going to have to reevaluate those incentives based on Act 47 to make sure that we do that with a lens for how do we preserve existing priority housing? How do we create new housing? As I shared earlier, this also, this direction also moves to our housing commission because it's not just going to be zoning, it's also going to require some ordinance. And I want to also make sure that it's expressed. We received information from our staff about concerns about how rapidly we add units because we're frankly already strained to do code enforcement and provide some other services in the city. So we need to be thoughtful about, you know, this kind of gets to what you mentioned earlier, Sarah, like the pace at which we are increasing volume of housing. But I think what's primary to here is that whatever decisions are made, we want to make sure that we are thinking about the preservation of existing families, family-sized housing, homeownership opportunity, affordability, and those larger units. So I'm gonna, I showed in the chat, I'm gonna email you all with that directly. And we were reminded of some specific recommendations from the 2017 Housing Needs Assessment, which do connect to this, which I think will help guide this discussion. I would encourage you all, like based on this council direction, you know, as came up before, when we think about how we update our regulations related to the Home Act, how can we maximize incentives to create that specific housing that we want? So I have some thoughts on that that are personal, so I won't say them now because they don't fit within the council narrative. But I think as we get to those discussions, the council has said, like, we want to keep that in mind. These are these 3 priority areas that we want to think about as we move through that work.
Can I also make one comment? I sat in on the meeting on Monday night.
Yeah.
And one thing that Elaine, the city manager, said too is there's going to have to be another level of this. It can't simply be that we incentivize or zone these problems away, that we have to find other resources to build these properties that we want. I don't know, it's just another element of it.
That's where I think the Housing Commission comes in and why we should be thinking of a joint meeting in the near term, in the near future.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned replacement ordinance earlier, if we're moving forward inclusionary zoning, it would be a part of that. If we want developers to somehow pay into the housing trust fund, it's multi-pronged.
Because really, I mean, I do believe if we eliminated all zoning, we still might not end up with what we need or what we want. So, you know, we still have to be, I mean, I know it doesn't really feel good to have other people in the other communities looking at us and telling that we're failing terribly. But it is, Winooski is not Burlington, you know? Anyway.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly not.
There is, what I want to be clear about is there is work we can do in our land use regulations, but that is not the only thing we can do. Like, that is not the end-all be-all solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on a second. Brendan, do you want to say something?
No, I mean, I think Sarah, I think everyone's frustrated, right? Like, I'm sure Burlington, people can't afford housing there.
Yeah, they're no better than we are, right?
So, and I think we're all in the same place in that, like, we don't want Winooski to just become like a bunch of box buildings, right? Like I think what I would like to see a lot more, right? Like, I live right near LaFountain Street, where single family homes exist next to quadplexes and fiveplexes and sixplexes very, very comfortably.
Yeah.
And it's great. Like, it's, for me, like, it's sort of an ideal mixed income type of community. And so I think we want more of that. And I think that there's more we can do to try to incentivize that in a smart way, you know, but we can't, I don't think we can or want to, as the mayor said, like, if we just allow overdevelopment, that has its own challenges too. So I think we should take what everyone is saying to heart. Like, I think we need to do more, but I think that we can do it consistent with I think this commission tries to think long-term and think about what actually everything that makes Winooski feel good, and trying to make it sustainable for people to stay long-term and really contribute to the city. And so I think we can do that. I think we can and need to do more, but I don't think we're as way off track in how we're thinking about it as maybe is being suggested.
Connor?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make a comment quickly about, because I was also in that meeting on Monday, and just to put another fine point on the mayor's comments. I mean, some of those comments are pretty emotional in terms of, people being forced out, and then there was, I think, pretty strong consensus, and obviously you can see that from the policy direction from the city council, from a lot of the city councilors, that said basically the commission in reviewing Act 47 parameters should not do the bare minimum. And so I think we were talking about last meeting, I think, Mike, you were like, well, do we want to have 10 units on one lot? And I think that our consensus is that's way too much. But I think I've been pretty tempered in the way that I approach these conversations, just because I really respect all of you in terms of your respective areas of expertise and how long you've been on the commission. I also think we have a pretty good diversity of opinions on this commission, but I think this is also an opportunity for us to, I think, review and revisit. Like, the Home Act is a really good opportunity to review some of the areas where we have been, in my opinion, kind of walking around the edges a little bit. And I say that both from a personal opinion, just because I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm a pretty, I don't want to say radical, but I'm a pretty accelerationist when it comes to these conversations. I'm fine with 10 units on one lot. I'm fine with really, eliminating parking and just getting rid of setbacks and whatever. But I also know that that's a pipe dream anyway, and everybody has, they come with their own missions and what they bring to the table here. But so there's the personal side, but there's also, in my opinion, I'm just wary of, what if we do all this work, send it back to the county? And I know this is supposition anyway, and hypothetical, but if we do all this work again, with parking regs, and then city council sees it and they're like, nope, not what we wanted, then I think that's a lot of wasted time too. So I think if we checkpoint with the mayor and city council more often in this process, I think it would be beneficial to both sides if we just continue pushing a little bit more, at least in the middle, and just not the bare minimum.
Okay. Abby, and then I'll let Philippe wants to make a comment too.
Yeah, I do totally agree that there needs to be a better line of communication so that we're getting feedback throughout the process from the council, but they're also understanding the nuances of what we're trying to do, which isn't very digestible, to a lot of people if you don't take the time to dig into it. I will say that Winooski, as a student of urban planning, that's what I get my master's degree in, and somebody who's dedicated their career to transportation planning for bikes and pedestrians. The reason I picked Winooski is because we're doing so much right. So I just want to acknowledge that. Winooski is a freaking cool place. It's super dense, it's super diverse, it's walkable, it's bikeable, we have transit. So Act 47 doesn't impact so much of our code because we're already more dense than, like our densities are higher than what's required in Act 47, and getting rid of one parking spot isn't a big deal because we're already pretty much doing it, but through incentives, right? So I just want to acknowledge that, like it's really for the Willisons and Miltons and everybody that's not doing their fair share for housing. So with that being said, I think that we're just gonna have to get more creative. I mean, so Act 47 doesn't give us the same leverage for incentives, but there's still a path forward. And I think one of the things that Eric had mentioned, like making things a conditional use, unless they have affordable units, 3+ bedroom units, home ownership opportunities, then it's a permanent use. So it's not like, oh, if you do that, you're gonna have to come to us and go in front of a board and spend money. It's like, no, we're gonna pass you through that process. And then really highlighting what form-based code, that was huge. The city undertook that full effort to basically streamline and rubber stamp any development in our gateway, which is supposed to be the densest developed huge apartment buildings to get a lot of units built, right? So the units that were getting built through form-based code aren't our priority housing style units, but it is allowing the larger developments. So I'm saying all this to like, I often think that we are trying to fix a broken city, and I do think like we have an awesome city and a lot of things that are working really, really well. It's how do we uplift these areas that have been identified in the city, and being that we're not developers, like what's understanding the tools and mechanisms to get this priority housing, I think is a continuous conversation. I think looking at neighbors like Burlington is helpful, and other places to see kind of how they're successfully navigating it. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. Sorry, it was I kind of went on, but I just wanted to say Burlington, Winooski, awesome, right? Like it's not, we're not Williston.
Like Brendan on his bed there, he's like, it's awesome.
Oh, no, Winooski is great. And I guess the last thing I want to say is I do think the point about re-legalizing what's on the ground is an interesting one, and something that I think is worth thinking about, right? Because it's always been sort of odd to me, like one of the things people really like Winooski because of like the neighborhood feel and all of that, and yet a lot of that was built like 100+ years ago and actually wouldn't be allowed to be built now, even though it's what we claim to really like and what we want to preserve. And I know that like, you know, there's this like on LeClaire Street, I think it's one of the properties on the list. It's like this turret Victorian house that was built in 1901, and it's amazing. And how nothing like that's going to be built anymore. Like it sucks. Like that's just like not going to happen. But I still think the point is well taken, that like somehow a lot of development that happened pre-zoning organically we like really like, and yet it's actually not technically allowed, even though it all continues to exist as a pre-existing non-conforming use. But that becomes a challenge if you want to change anything. So it's something to think about as well. I did think that was a well taken point. Great.
Philippe, you wanted one more comment?
Yeah, well, I know everyone's tired, but I think this topic is extremely important.
Yeah. So I'll give you 30 seconds. No,
okay. Abby, I completely agree. I moved here. I fell in love with the city because you can walk everywhere, you can bike everywhere. Everybody is super friendly. The density is heartwarming. And what I said at City Council meeting on Monday is that I want more of it. And so to the gateway issue, that has been extremely visible, and that was extremely encouraging. And I think in the data you were able to see at least a flattening of rent increases in Winooski during that period, whereas in Burlington they were significantly increasing at the same time. So those efforts helped, and we should continue those efforts and maybe not just limit them to the gateway districts, but expand them into the RA, RB, RC districts, or maybe eliminating that 3-tiered system altogether to encourage that kind of organic growth. And the point is, you don't do that. You do that things don't change overnight, right? But the next time someone has an opportunity to develop a piece of land, they can be sort of maximalist about it and put a sixplex in an RC district right now, or where they can't right now. And another big component of this is there's a lot of money for housing vouchers and no way to spend them because the housing is so expensive and there's not an available. So if you think about the pool of money available for housing vouchers, if housing were cheaper and more easily available, you'd be able to help more people with the same amount of money. And that's something that a city like Houston is really good about, where they've, if you take it at the extreme, that's what you would get. A city where there isn't the homeless crisis that you see everywhere else in the United States, because they have social workers that are able to very quickly place people into somewhere to live, and the federal and state dollars that they get for housing vouchers just stretch a lot further. So, I mean, at this point, I'm rambling a little bit, but I do take issue with the idea that Winooski isn't Burlington. I mean, they're very similar cities. The great advantage that we have here is that our politics, I think, are a lot better. It's a lot less contentious, but the density is high. The diversity is probably even higher. We're lower income, maybe. But we've got great bones in this city, and we could do a lot with it. And I'm extremely optimistic about our chances, or about the growth of this city if we here in this planning commission set it up correctly. You're establishing the rules of the game that everyone comes here to play, and it should be as permissive as possible, because that's what great cities are.
Great. Thanks, Philippe.
So, Mike,
Okay.
Evan has his hand up online if you'd like to recognize him as well. Otherwise, we can continue moving on with city updates.
Evan, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, okay?
Evan.
Well, this is just one thing that I was reminded of from what the mayor said about the city manager's concern regarding increased code enforcement and city staff requirements if Winooski increased density. There was a Urban 3 study. They do municipal studies basically based on tax revenue per acre, so to see like what parts of the city contribute most to the tax base and the cost of running the city. So just kind of to see the dichotomy between single family and kind of, I think, similar build styles to certain areas in Winooski that maybe as you get towards Colchester don't exist. The New North End generates about $1.1 million per acre in revenue. The Old North End generates $4.4 million in revenue. And then downtown generates $8.4 million in revenue. And I imagine if you looked at Winooski, you'd see something similar, where the affordable housing in Winooski that is more dense subsidizes the more expensive single-family units on the outskirts. So just
You want to wrap it up, Evan?
Yeah, that's all. So.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right. So, Mayor, are you still there?
I am. That was my only city update.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Eric?
The only thing I'll just mention is, as was mentioned earlier, that we are working on short-term rental regulations. So that is in process with the Housing Commission primarily, and should be coming forward to City Council shortly, I think, maybe December, but don't quote me on that. And I believe that is all I have for city updates at this time.
I did get a question from one of the planning commissioners who's not here tonight. Do you know what's going on with the armory?
I know they have a permit to demo it, but as far as any type of sale or redevelopment, I don't know anything about that.
Okay.
But the mayor just raised her hand, so maybe she
Yeah, it's late 24, early 25 now. It keeps pushing out.
Okay. And do you know why they're planning to tear it down?
My presumption is because they have moved out of the building and it's pretty heavily contaminated with either lead, asbestos, or some other form of PCB or something else.
Yeah.
So I think in order to either sell it or redevelop on that site, they need to remove the building that's there now and clean it up. So
Great. Okay, anyone else have any other business?
Abby.
Abby,
Any
sorry.
any updates on development of the proposed development across from Bevy or the one by the school? Are either of those moving forward?
So I'll start with the second one first. The one up by the school, I believe you're referring to the 379 381 Main Street. So as far as I know, so they have a zoning permit. I don't believe they've gotten their building permits yet. I believe they're working through that. The site is, I think, has some, the soils are fairly wet. So I believe, are in the near future going to start a process where they start to dry it out, which I don't exactly know what that looks
Big
like,
blowers?
but I mean, quite possibly. So they are planning to move forward with that project here as I think starting some construction in the spring is my guess. But they do have their zoning permit, so they are on the clock with that before it expires to move forward, needing to get their building permits. The project on East Allen Street across from the Bevy, they have conditional approval, but they are still working on meeting some of their conditions. I actually just reached out to them the other day to see where they were with it, and they're looking at some design changes that may reduce the overall number of units and potentially some of the construction methods. But they will most likely be bringing back some level of redesign. So whether that's going to meet the thresholds where it needs to go back through the process completely or have some other level of review is to be determined based on what they come up with. So they have some conditions they need to meet before they'll be issued a zoning permit, but they're trying to figure out what they need to do to move forward. Basically the conversation I had was that the costs of what they had designed were so high there's no way they could build it.
Gotcha.
What developer is that? Where are they from?
The applicant was Giles Wagner and Brian Libby.
And where are they from? Do you know?
I don't know offhand.
And do you know if that's one bedroom studios?
It was a mix. It was going to be a mix of ones and twos, and I think a handful of studios and maybe 1 or 2 3-bedroom, but I don't remember. I think they were going to do it all as market rate though.
Yeah, and the one up on Main Street, is that all 1 bedroom or twos?
The Main Street project up by the school is a mix of ones and twos.
Yeah, okay.
And I think a couple of studios as well.
Yeah.
I know it's really late, but I'm going to ask one more question.
No.
I haven't even gone through my other business yet.
Oh,
so.
I'm sorry, Eric.
Go ahead, Sarah.
It's just going back to trying to be aware which staffing and regulations and development. I just want to point out to you all, you've heard this before, but our building is having some serious issues which are costing us a lot of money, more than $500,000 we'll be putting into our balconies. And one of the problems was that I guess what I'm asking is, are these new buildings that are going up being scrutinized and the regulations are really tight and corners aren't being cut and we don't have enough staff to cut to see that everything is being built properly to code? And I'm just putting that out there as another, you can develop fast, but we also have to be careful that we're doing it correctly from that building point of view, literally. And the same with the building across the street here that had all that sprinkler problem, I think it was last year, and everybody had to move out for a while, and nobody has to answer it. I'm just laying it on the table.
Well, I will answer it if you'd like an answer.
Sure.
So I guess what I would say is for the larger buildings, the public buildings, they are all reviewed and permitted by the State Division of Fire Safety. So we don't have while we do issue a local building permit, we do not do a separate review of the project itself. So the state actually does all the permit review, all the project review and permitting for the construction, plumbing, electrical, et cetera, of those projects. And then once they start construction, generally, like for example, when the school is being redeveloped, every week the state inspectors and our inspectors were on site to go through another piece of the project as it was under construction. So depending on the project, they could be there every week, every other week, or some variation thereof. But I would say I think every situation is different, but it's not for a lack of trying to ensure that the projects are meeting all the applicable codes and are being inspected appropriately as well.
Any more updates, Eric?
Yes. So the only other thing I want to update you all on is that this will be our only meeting in November. So there is not a second meeting this month. We will meet again on December 14th, that second Thursday. So please mark your calendars. We'll continue our discussion on the amendments and see if we can make some progress. And then that will be our only meeting for December as well. We will not have a second meeting in December. With that, we will, however, start back with 2 meetings a month again in January. So be ready for 2 meetings a month again.
Okay.
Coming up soon.
So I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn, but I want to thank everyone that came personally here. There was quite a crew here, folks online, and of course the commission, Eric, and the mayor for coming, and I thought this was a very good meeting. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, Brendan, Abby seconds. All those in favor? Anyone opposed and wants to stay longer? I guess not, we're adjourned.